Hi, I'm Kevin,
And I'm Amanda.
and we are serving up
All that jam.
All That Jam, Quick Hit. Jono Manson on his studio, the kitchen sink.
I started to make a list of people that you had worked with as either a mixer, a recorder, an engineer. You've been doing this since back when we're talking about in the 90s there.
Yeah.
Can we get into a little bit about the different hats? Because I think a lot of laymen are like engineer, same thing as a producer, same thing as a mixer, but I don't believe they are the same things.
Sure. I started recording and producing bands actually in the mid '80s. I first had a gig working in a recording studio as an assistant in 1979. I was just a teenager. I was 19 years old, and I uh, I always liked being in studios when I had a band. And at a certain point, a friend of mine loaned me like essentially a 16 track analog recording studio with enough gear to make records. And I set it up in my apartment in Brooklyn, much to the chagrin of my downstairs neighbors, and really just started experimenting. And I understood the basic concepts, but I just started experimenting and really, you know, um, learning how to do it. And but you're right, it's kind of in the early '90s that I began my career, if you will, as an audio engineer and producer, and they are different jobs. I mean, right now, I am the proprietor of a pretty well appointed studio here in Santa Fe, and my role on any given day can be quite different. There's records that I'm producing, meaning and that role changes based on the artist I'm working with. At times, if I'm working with a singer-songwriter, for example, I'm in charge of everything from selecting who's gonna play on the record, working out the arrangements for the songs. If you're working with a band, sometimes a lot of that, is taken care of by the group, and then it's a question of talking about the aesthetic of the recording, how we're gonna capture it, what the workflow is gonna be like, and so on. And then there's times where I'm working solely as the audio engineer, where an outside producer will bring in a project, and I work with some pretty, all over the map, people from all over, and some pretty big producers have brought records in here. And at that point, my job is to help them realize their goal. And of course, when you're working as an engineer, and audio engineers listening to this, I'm sure will relate. Even if you are not officially hired as the producer, the minute that the artist says, "How was that? Should I do another take?" And you respond, you are becoming the producer in the sense that, you know, anytime you offer a word of advice, then you're producing. And so um, I really enjoy all of those things, doing all of them. The one kind of double-edged sword about the fact that this aspect of my career has continued to blossom, and I say blossom because that's a positive thing. The only potential downside is that I have to, especially now, it becomes not, I wouldn't say more difficult, but I have to make a more concerted effort to carve out time for my own creative pursuits. People think if you have your own recording studio, you can make an album anytime you want, but that's not necessarily the case.
Exactly. So let me ask you about time. How did COVID affect you and your work there in the studio and your work as an artist separately with your own stuff?
Well, I can say that at the beginning of the pandemic, of course, like everybody, everything shut down. I stopped touring, and the studio also went dark for a short period of time. But thankfully, I was never so thankful that over the decades I've put eggs in this particular basket. Then when I was able to resume work on records in the studio, even before it was really feasible to be back on the road or playing gigs in crowded venues and all of the things that we all had to stop doing. So it did affect me, but I think and also another byproduct of that is that I've been a little bit slower to get back out gigging than some of my colleagues because I got so busy doing records for people. And also, I'm sure as a lot of people have told you about their pandemic experiences, a lot of artists, there was the floodgates opened and there was a backlog of creative work that had built up from people being all of a sudden off the road, cloistered away in their homes, writing albums, working on stuff that then needed to be recorded, you know? So at a certain point, I really felt that. And it wasn't just a feeling. And people were telling me, yeah, I wrote 3 albums worth of stuff, in 6 months, and now I need to start recording. So it did affect me, but thankfully I was able to keep working.
If you are enjoying All That Jam, please like and subscribe to our social media channels at All That Jam Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or visit our website, allthatjampod.com. Make sure to sign up for our email list and tune in every week for new episodes.
Also, look for full interviews on our YouTube channel. And remember, stay beautiful, but don't stay underground too long.